Hey everybody, Sid here. Today's video, we're going to take a little bit of a different walk through conversation today. Something maybe a little bit more serious, but with something I think ultimately maybe a question that a lot of people might have at some certain point in time in their lives. I'm going to talk about a certain doctor named Duncan Macdougall. And there was a movie that was made a while back about his study that he did about what a soul may weigh. When we die, does our soul leave our body? And if it does, how much might it weigh? The movie that came out is, I think, 2003. It was called 21 grams. That is the number figure that he put on the weight of the souls in his particular experiment that he did. It took place back a really long time ago on April 10th of 1901 in Dorchester, Massachusetts. He set out to prove whether or not a soul had mass and could it be measured. So his experiment participants were all dying patients that were where death was going to be very imminent. And they were placed on these specially made Fairbanks weight scales just prior to death. And so basically they could weigh what the person died exactly at the time of, or just before they died, and then just after they died. And what sort of time frame are we looking at if there is a change in weight in this process. And the patients were chosen based on the fact that they were, like I said, they were very close to dying, so that was one of the, the imminent big number one reasons of how they would get on this short list of being a participant in this experiment. 4 of the patients were dying from tuberculosis, 1 from diabetes, and 1 from unknown causes. There was 5 men and 1 woman. The patients were weighed, like I said, before and after death to determine if there was any differences in the weight in that time. When these folks died, there was in fact a difference in weight. The very first person that died, it was about a difference of about 3/4 of an ounce. And eventually they ruled out, did it have something to do with the air in the lungs? Did it have to do anything with bodily fluids? Taking all that into account, and they were able to explain that the change in weight had nothing to do with any of those things. So in essence, they couldn't explain the change in weight based on any data that they would have received from things that would have happened in the normal course of someone dying. Something you can easily quantify anyway. There was a quote that I got of something that Dr. Macdougall said when this happened, that the instant that life ceased, the opposite scale fell with suddenness that was astonishing, as if something had been lifted from the body. Immediately all the usual deductions were made from the physical loss of weight, and it was discovered there was a full ounce of weight unaccounted for. This is an actual quote from him. It was determined that the average weight loss was about 3/4 of an ounce between all 6 people. Now, they didn't all lose the exact amount of weight, but that was the average. The 21 ounces was the average amount of weight among all 6 people. There's also 5 separate doctors that took their own measurements, and everything jived between all the different doctors that were taking all of the measurements and all that kind of stuff. So everything lined up between all the different people involved that were measuring all the information they had. One patient did have an interesting distinction. He did remain at the same weight for 1 full minute after he died, and then there was the drop of about 3/4 of an ounce. So about roughly around 21 grams. So, and the other ones, it was all immediate. When they died, that change was reflected immediately. And Macdougall's explanation was that this particular person, he thought this patient tended to be what he called a phlegmatic man, and it would make sense for the soul to take longer to leave. Which I guess is, I mean, I guess considering the time, I guess I might, that doesn't seem like such an unusual takeaway for someone to give for the reason why something may be different for the particular person. I don't know if people in 1901 would have been shaking their heads at that answer, or I don't know. It just seems like an interesting, or maybe it was maybe he meant it. Maybe it's a little tongue in cheek. I don't know, but I think that was just kind of a nice way of putting it. I think though. Macdougall also performed the same experiment on 15 dogs, and with the dogs, there was no change from just prior to death and after death, nothing. So the assumption with the dogs would be possibly, maybe it's only, or thus far, maybe it's just people, so far, humans, that have souls that we know of, and maybe dogs don't have souls, was the possible explanation. And there was also a high school physics teacher in California that performed the experiment in 1917 with rats. And he had the same results as Macdougall did with the dogs, where there was no change in the weight when the rats died. So again, you could draw the same conclusion that Macdougall did with the dogs that the teacher experienced with the rats. Now, after Macdougall's initial experiment with weighing people during the death process, he did change his focus to trying to capture the soul leaving the body by taking pictures of people when they died. And unfortunately, he never, after the first set of experiments that he did, he didn't have any other significant scientific breakthroughs as far as that goes. And Dr. Macdougall did pass away in 1920. And unfortunately, I think probably that it's unfortunate that there's been no other work done since then, as far as anyone really taking a look at whether or not you can quantify or whether you can, I guess, specify that maybe there's a soul, and that's what there might be, what the change in weight might be related to. Can we quantify that like Dr. Macdougall thought he did, or suggested that he did? One of the things I vaguely remember the movie 21 Grams coming out, but what really made me get a little more interested in this was I watched the TV show called Evil, and one of the episodes that they did had to do with this specifically, where they actually, within the framework of that episode, was that they were doing this exact thing where they found a guy that they were going to hook up to this scale, and when he died, they were going to measure his weight from before and after, and of course within the show they determined he had lost this amount of weight, and they attribute it to that being his soul. And then he was like clinically dead for a period of time, and then he came back to life, which was kind of an interesting TV take on that, which I thought was interesting. And of course they did have more conjecture within the show that was also interesting to think about when it comes to this. If you're considering if we have souls, and if we do have souls, what would the way, would it all be pretty much the same? If there's differences, is there differences in even slight differences, because maybe different people are going to have different things weighing on their soul more than others. Were you a good person that did good things, and might that affect what your soul weighs, versus somebody who was an inherently bad person and a psychopath that killed people or something? Maybe the weight of their soul would be different, or would they even have a soul? Or the people that you hear about, the people going down to the crossroads and selling their soul to the devil, and can we account for that somehow scientifically? Which I kind of think it would be really interesting if somebody maybe did some more actual serious scientific studies of that. And I'm not even, I'm personally, I'm not Christian. So, I mean, looking at it from just a Christian standpoint, I mean, I'm Jewish. So, I mean, looking at even from that standpoint, just an overall general religious, non-denominational kind of way of looking at it, I think it would be interesting. But I also don't know if it's one of those things where maybe people just aren't interested, or is it one of those kind of things where people, maybe, is it like, and I'm not trying to offend anybody with this comparison, but you have people that are interested maybe in things like cryptids like the Loch Ness monster and Sasquatch and Yeti, that maybe if you're a serious scientist, maybe you wouldn't necessarily admit to wanting to do research involving the Loch Ness monster. I mean, would it fall under that sort of kind of thing, why people aren't doing it? Or maybe just are people not doing because they just don't think that there's a soul that you could quantify? I don't know. It'd be interesting to hear other people's opinions as far as the realistic aspects of would you even be interested in if people were possibly potentially going to do research on something like that. I think it would just, I would love to read the results that they got. I think that would be interesting. And then also too, and another aspect of this is, I haven't had, I've slowed up on my videos for a while now, because about 2 months ago, and this kind of tying into, this and then something else I'm going to talk about here in a minute. About 2 months ago, my mom died in a rollover accident where she lives over in North Georgia, Western North Carolina area. And so for the last couple of months, I've been dealing with a lot of estate, end of life kind of stuff, a lot of stuff. And now, I mean, I've finally gotten to a point where I'm not as emotional with stuff now with that. So, and I'm having to deal with the minutia and the hassle of, hurrying up and waiting on other people to get to the point where I can get something done so I can get other things done. And, there was no will. And so I'm having to be sworn in tomorrow as the administrator of her estate. I mean, that's how long it's taking. So, so it's kind of wanting to use this as, segueing into, all these, you've got the things that might be a little bit more interesting to talk about, like, the work that people like Dr. Macdougall did versus, all the real life, end of life kind of things that, everybody should at least consider and think about and discuss. And, oh, please, everybody, if you don't have a will, please have a will. A lot of things in my situation would have been made much easier if there had been a will in place. At the very least, the amount of time I would have had to wait to do certain things would have been drastically different, and so on. And just it is a lot easier to deal with things if you can do it beforehand, before the death happens, and you're not upset and emotional, and you're having to deal with all this stuff that maybe it's harder to have to deal with, because it's the person died, and you're having to deal with that too on top of everything else. And also too, another thing that I came across, just, I think sometimes things just kind of come across your path for a reason sometimes. Now, this particular stuff didn't necessarily apply to my mom's situation, because she was in a car accident, but I did, since that happened, I did come across a channel on YouTube, and it's called Hospice Nurse Julie is the channel. And she's obviously a hospice nurse who's named Julie, and her content revolves around hospice related and end of life related content. And there's a lot of stuff that, I may never need to necessarily, I may not be in a position that it would necessarily apply to me, but there's a lot of stuff that if I hadn't started watching her channel, I would have had no idea not a clue. And there is a lot of good information that if it's not something you have dealt with having someone, end of life in hospice where, they are in the process of, eventually, they've gotten to the point of being in hospice that they're fixing to die. And there's a lot of important things that I think would at least make you feel a little bit more at ease if you understood what happens and what things mean when they get to these certain points at the end of life in hospice care. If you know about it ahead of time, instead of it being scary and unknown and you don't understand what it means and you think it's something worse than maybe it actually is. So I'm going to put a link down in the description for her channel. And just because I think it is, and I'm not connected to her in any way. This isn't, she's not like a personal friend of mine or anything. Just, it's a channel that I came across and I found it very useful. And I think it's something that would be good for a lot of people just to, at least give it a look and, maybe see if that's something that, you might be able to get useful information from, and, maybe in the future. And it seems like from the stats that I get from the limited number of stats I get about my channel and the folks that are watching my content, they're basically, it's people that are my age and older. So like 50s and older, mostly, predominantly. So we're all kind of in that same boat and age range, and, probably, I mean, I'm getting close enough to, at some point, who knows when I might end up in hospice care also. So, or, we all are very likely either gonna know or might know somebody soon. Hopefully not too soon that might apply to. So I hope it may be able to help somebody, at least give you a little bit of comfort and to know what to expect. So sorry to kind of end the video on kind of a little bit of a bummer, but just a little explanation as to why I'm a little bit more quiet with the videos. I've just had an awful lot of stuff to deal with the last couple of months and stuff, and just wanted to segue into a few kind of end-of-life things that I thought were interesting to kind of tie into what I had kind of going on with my situation here also. So, and I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up for today. And hopefully, it won't be too long before I have another video that I do. Just hang in there. I'm not forgetting about you. I'm going to have videos that I put up and all that kind of stuff. But it's just, hopefully things will start, the wheels will start spinning faster now that I'm going to be sworn in as the administrator of my mom's estate. So everybody cross your fingers, God willing, we can get the stuff situated so I can get her household and not have that hanging over my head any longer. So, well, so that's gonna be it for today. Hope everybody's doing great, and leave me a like, leave me an unlike, a dislike, or whatever floats your boat. I'm just glad you came, and if you're still here listening to me talk, thank you so much. I appreciate each and every one of y'all. Y'all have a great day and a great rest of your week. See you later. Bye.